On today's episode.
And it's basically saying we think that there should be a Bill of Rights that makes sure that if you identify as transgender, if you have a gender identity other than what you were born with, that you should be able to participate in sports, that you shouldn't be limited in what bathrooms you use, all these kinds of things. And with the majorities in Congress right now, this isn't going to pass anytime soon. But this is precisely the kind of thing that people put forward 1 year just to get the ideas out there so that later on, when they've got the backing, it's that much easier to push through. Welcome to the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Our world today presents people with complicated issues of life and death, marriage and family, health and science. It can be a struggle to understand or deal with them. We're here to help by bringing good information and a fresh biblical perspective to these matters and more. Join us now for Life Challenges.
Hi, and welcome back. I'm Krista Potratz, and I'm here today with Pastors Bob Fleischman and Jeff Samuelson. And we welcome you to the month of March. We are going to be tackling our current events for the month of March here. And we are going to start by talking about one that, Jeff, you had come across, which was a face transplant from Barcelona.
Yeah, I think most of us are familiar with the concept of a face plant.
This was and I've all done it at least once.
Yeah. This, it's not the first time a face transplant has been done. It really is an absolutely incredibly involved operation to do that because it's not just connecting a few things. There are all sorts of muscles and nerve fibers and things like that need to be connected in order to transplant a face. And it was a good and wonderful thing that this woman who had lost her face or use of her face got something new. What made this particularly interesting was that this is the world's first transplant with a donor who was euthanized. And in the article, this is pretty much presented as, isn't this a wonderful thing? It's not. This is somebody who chose death and then chose to donate their organs and such in this way. There were apparently no efforts mentioned at suicide prevention, to keep this person who was choosing death alive. And it appears from the story that the primary focus of the medical teams was how are we going to do the planning and preparation for this surgery, and not at all on, is this a person who should be dying? Is this person actually ready for death? Is this the natural time for this death? And there's this thing called the dead donor rule with organ transplantation. And that's basically, simply put, donors are supposed to be dead,
right,
completely dead before they donate. And this appears to be a violation of this because they're already planning for all of this before the patient is ever anywhere near dead. And it appears that the patient was killed at a particular time and in a specific way in order to make sure this donation happened. And it was not at all thinking about the condition or what was best for the donor.
One of the struggles I have with organ transplants, and I'm a fan, I have signed my driver's license as an organ donor and so forth. But one of the concerns I do have is that the outcry for organs has created all sorts of very gray area motivations for people. And one of the problems you have here is the sweeping nature of euthanasia that seems to be going global. In other words, all the countries seem to be embracing it. You're always hearing of new countries, new states that have legalized some form of medical assistance in dying where you can take control of your life, is that you enter into it an almost charitable motivation behind it. Like, since my spouse died, I don't like the life I've got left. Already, assisted suicide laws have eroded to the point now where just even depression can be seen as a valid grounds. So why don't we just kind of like plan this all out, orchestrate it so that my organs are in the best possible use to help the most possible people? And no one has ever stepped back to ask is euthanasia correct in the first place? People are just choosing what they want to do. We faced it at the beginning of life, too. Those of us who've been around the block a while, we've had this question come up about aborted children. If you could abort the children early enough so that you can use the tissue and the cells and so forth, and we could get some good out of it. It was behind the concern about vaccines. It gets raised in the concern about embryonic stem cell research. It gets raised in the concerns about fetal tissue use and testing and so forth. Does it add a kind of an incentive?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually help somebody by doing a wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it not seem so bad,
Yeah.
I think, is what it is. Because, I saw the video, too, of the doctors talking about just how great it was. And, I mean, they talked about the donor, I mean, just in a very positive light. And it was all just so wonderful. And I kind of thought, oh, boy, I mean, is this going to make other people want to do this more? And I mean, I guess that is kind of the question, like, is this where things are going now?
Well, it's such a peculiar time in social development where, on the one hand, we have tremendous amounts of money being spent on longevity work, trying to get you to live longer, even to the point of transhumanism, of transplanting thought processes into computers and so forth that could outlive you. And then on the other hand, we've got the old Richard Lamb, former governor of Colorado, mentality that the elderly have a duty to die and to get out of the way. This idea that we're all going to die anyways. Why don't we start planning it out so it helps the most people in the best possible way? Those notions need to be challenged because there's something fundamentally wrong with any time you decide to take your own life and then to hold it out there as it actually could be a good thing, a wonderful thing. And the abortion rights movement has got decades of experience doing that. Well, you get these Oscar nominees get up there and they accept their award, and then they boast about the abortion that allowed them to continue their career. And look at all the good that has come from me killing this child. That's what happens with society, is it latches on to the worst possible thing and then tries to paint the best possible picture. This is fundamentally wrong at its core.
Well, the next article that we wanted to talk about was the Transgender Bill of Rights. Jeff, can you describe a little bit what?
On the one hand, somebody could say, well, this isn't really worth our attention because the chances of it getting passed in Congress right now are next to zero. This is a resolution introduced in Congress by Representative Pramila Jayapal, from a Democrat from Washington State, along with a whole bunch of co-sponsors, to establish a transgender Bill of Rights that's basically designed to undo all of the recent gains that our society has made to restore rationality to this whole matter of transgender issues and all these kinds of things. And it's basically saying we think that there should be a Bill of Rights that makes sure that if you identify as transgender, if you have a gender identity other than what you were born with, that you should be able to participate in sports, that you shouldn't be limited in what bathrooms you use, all these kinds of things. And with the majorities in Congress right now, this isn't going to pass anytime soon. But this is precisely the kind of thing that people put forward one year just to get the ideas out there so that later on, when they've got the backing, it's that much easier to push through. We've seen that, for instance, with all sorts of assisted suicide type of things. They just keep pushing it out there. And so it's I think it is worth some attention just so that we're aware that this is going on and that there's a push for it. And I guess primarily to say, don't think that anybody has won this yet.
Mm-hmm.
Just because we've seen some positive developments from our perspective doesn't mean that they're going to last. It's still a fight that needs to be fought, and there's still a lot of support in various parts of society and government for the most extreme position on these issues.
What's interesting about this effort is it's actually a resolution just saying that we've got to work on this. In other words, if the resolution were to pass, no law would change right now. But it does commit Congress to start looking for ways to create this change. So then you get the camel's nose in the tent, and then you begin to start working on it. And I've said this many times, what sounded like a dumb idea 10 years from now becomes like mainstream. And we've seen it happen on other issues. And I think we have to be very, very aware that there's a broader agenda here. And that is, it's basically the denial of biological sex. And the idea that you are the sum and substance of whatever you think, and what's to prevent you from thinking that you're a tree? Or I remember my brother, when we were growing up, he wanted to be a helicopter. So I didn't know how that was going to happen, but just because he thought it was a helicopter didn't make any difference over what he really was.
I think you raise a really good point there too, Jeff, that these things kind of keep going and that they're not over yet, because I too think, we've made it seems right. Like in some ways, common sense is winning and people are understanding that, boys are boys and girls are girls and whatever. But then you see these things and you realize, oh no, that's not necessarily. And I think too, that is maybe kind of what happened with the Dobbs decision too, right? It's like you think like, oh, okay, like society's coming around now. Roe v. Wade's been overturned, and nope, it's still a big thing. It's still a big issue. There's still a lot of people fighting for a certain outcome, and so I just think this is another just example that we still have to be strong and be aware of these things going on.
And I'd say one last thing also about this is that if anybody is telling you, oh, I don't understand why you're still making a big deal out of this, or, it's not the big deal you're making it out to be. Like, this is evidence that there is something to be concerned about, because this is just incredibly comprehensive. It's not, oh, just give us this one little thing. It's give us everything.
Yeah, and that's what this is. This clearly is open for everything.
Yeah. This is something you can point to and say, hey, this is in the United States Congress. This is being put forward as this. So it's not nothing. It's definitely something.
Right. And the person who put this forward was elected by enough people to win the majority to get her position. So you have to remember, this spirit is still there. And my concern is, my love for history is, everything's a pendulum swing. So if we're enjoying a nice positive time of slight return back to traditional values and everything, I get a feeling that when that pendulum starts swinging the other way, it's really going to swing.
Well, the next article that we want to talk about too is related to dementia. And Bob, this is one that you had come across, and it is the reading and writing can lower dementia risk by almost 40%, study suggests. When I read that, I thought, yeah, okay, sounds good. That makes sense, right? But could you tell us a little bit about the article and what was interesting to you?
Well, and if you're a regular listener to the podcast, we've talked before about the distinction between a correlation and a causation. This is not causation. They're not saying that if you sit down, you read a book a week, that you're going to be able to avoid dementia. But there is a correlation, which means it seems that people who keep reading seem to exercise things. In fact, as recently as this morning, I was reading an article that there's some additional research now out there that seems to suggest that there's a certain neuroplasticity that occurs in the brain, even in the elderly. There are these people who get into their 80s who seem to have just as healthy of cognitive ability as they did in their 40s and 50s. And they're unique. Now, the question is, are you a reader because you don't have the underlying things that cause dementia, or does reading help you forestall or fight off dementia? But there is a correlation, which means there is nothing wrong with turning off the TV and maybe reading. I mentioned that my father, who died at 90, I had to keep up subscriptions to the local Washington County newspaper and the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, because my dad read those papers from beginning to end every morning. And he also, I was always buying him books because he liked to read. And my mother now, who's coming up on 88, she's a big reader. And it's quite a pleasure to have a cognitive conversation with them. So I think that there's definitely a correlation. And I think it raises an interesting thing because I'm always looking for different bridge ministry opportunities. And as society is aging, one of the things that I think our congregations can look at in building, bridge ministry is looking for opportunities to bring material and encourage reading as people get older. And look, the old church library wasn't as bad of an idea as maybe you might have thought it was. It just might have to take on a little bit more digital look or something.
Yeah, one of the thought, it wasn't in the article, was a thought that I had after reading it. I mean, the subtitle, cognitive health in later life is strongly influenced by lifelong exposure to intellectually stimulating environments, say researchers. And I was just thinking there are probably all sorts of people of a certain age who are saying, oh, yeah, I read all the time. But what they are reading is social media junk and so forth. And it's not intellectually stimulating. In fact, it's emotionally stimulating in many cases. It's telling you the things that you want to hear. Mm-hmm. And it's not actually forcing you to think about anything. And we want to make sure that people, anybody who sees this, hears us talking about this and says, oh yeah, I ought to do more of that. Realize that what you're looking for is books, is newspaper articles that go into depth on things, magazines, journals, and things like that. Even novels and fiction, but not things that are simply serving you up the things that make you feel good.
So what makes something intellectual? It's interesting because it just had a board meeting. My board had to listen to me diatribe on this for about an hour, and that is, what's the difference between a sermon that is foundationally correct, historically accurate, and doesn't connect, and one that comes right into you, sits next to you in the pew, talks right to you and everything. And that is, there's kind of this idea that it creates what's called dissonance, which is it identifies a challenge in your life, and it forces you to participate in the effort to solve it. When your pastor just tells you the historical events that occurred during the Passion Week and Easter, and then if he talks about dealing with the sudden death that occurred in your family and so forth, the dissonance is all of the emotion and the heartache and the intellectual challenge of dealing with a sudden and unexpected loss and how this all makes sense. That's the dissonance. So when Jeff's talking about you read the newspaper, you read the books and so forth, we're not talking Harlequin romances here, and we're not talking children's storybooks. We're talking about reading material that maybe you don't always agree with or that challenges some of your notions and has you thinking through what is the solution, especially in the light of God's Word.
Well, another article that you had come across, Bob, was this one about the Puerto Rico governor signs law to recognize fetus as human being, as critics warn of consequences. So what happened in Puerto Rico?
In February of 2026 of this year, they signed into law just declaring a fetus is a person. It was actually designed to, if you murder a pregnant woman, you're going to be facing a double homicide charge. In other words, it was acknowledging the reality. In the pro-life movement, we embrace any opportunity to help society understand that a person is a person no matter how small. I mean, it just, at the risk of sounding like Dr. Seuss, but that an unborn child is a person. It's recognized that way in the Bible. Prior to Roe v. Wade, 1973, it was recognized that way before. What I found interesting about the article was the critics. And I always like the critics always act like this is something new. This is something we've never experienced. This is something, it's going to be this wholesale mayhem on the legal system and so forth. No, that's people who've been conditioned by a culture that said it's okay to kill children. They are the ones who talk that way. The reality is this. Prior to abortion rights, it was wrong to take the life of an unborn child. So if you harm a woman and cause her to lose her life and the life of the child, there were consequences for it, double consequences of some sort. Now, a crafty lawyer might say, well, that child, we don't know if that child would have survived. We don't know if that child would. I mean, they would have found all the loopholes that laws possibly can give you to try to not, face the full brunt of the consequences of your actions. But it doesn't change the reality that what Puerto Rico simply did was acknowledge the obvious. And that is, you kill a mother who is expecting a child, you have killed two people.
Yeah, the article that you shared with us was from the AP, the Associated Press,
Mm-hmm.
which, theoretically is supposed to be the bastion of objective journalism. The article...
even the title.
Yeah,
Was...
it's all about, this is how this is so bad that this has happened. And nowhere, I mean, the most positive thing that's in here is some cheered the amendment signed into law Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
That was the sole thing from the people who supported this idea. There was no engagement whatsoever with the concepts that Bob was just talking about. Instead, it was all, this is so dangerous and it's going to mess with the relationship between women and their doctors and all these kinds of things, which were not within the scope of the law. But, at the same time, we as pro-lifers say, well, duh, if this is a human life in there, well, then, yeah, abortion would be problematic. You should realize that. But just showing how the media in this instance is not balanced, let alone on our side.
I think it's important. I think that's a really good point to point out, that the bias that was in the headline, that was in the article, because it's nearly impossible. It's impossible for me to create unbiased stories. It's important to understand that there is a bias. So if you feel abortion rights was always supposed to be a good thing, you're going to look at news like this and you're going to paint it in the darkest possible light. And that's what they did. But I think this was a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've kind of reached near the end of the episode here, where we do our now AI update and found that every month we have a lot of AI stories. The first one we wanted to talk about was, there was an article with an AI date for Valentine's Day. And I believe this was it in New York or some big city where you could take your AI significant other out on a date on Valentine's and go to, I don't know, was it a restaurant or some type of
bar.
cafe, bar,
bar
to socialize with your AI. I thought it was funny. I think it was either the article or the video mentioned that, it wasn't very popular yet. There still is a stigma out there with dating your AI.
Yeah, I'm just too ugly to get a real date, so I got to create another.
So, I thought, well, okay. At least we have that so far. The one video or advertisement for it that I saw too, in one way, they painted it as like practice for getting a relationship, maybe. Like you can kind of practice on this AI girlfriend or boyfriend that you have. And I thought, okay, well, maybe there's like a little something to that, although I think practicing in real life is probably better. But yeah, it was a very, very interesting idea.
Yeah. There were two things in the article that jumped out at me. One of them was just, it kind of made me laugh. The author is saying, looking around the same Tuesday night, however, I got the impression people with AI companions would rather interact with them in solitude. The bar was mostly filled with journalists and content creators filming their experience going on virtual dates with either their personal AI or one of the built-in characters. So basically, this is one of those things where the people they were there to report on, there were hardly any of them. It was mainly just the journalists and such who were there to make this a story. And the other thing that jumped out at me was early in the article, if this seems odd, it shouldn't be. Increasingly, people are looking to AI platforms for romantic connection. The one does not follow from the other. It's odd. It should be odd. It doesn't matter how many people are doing it or how often or whatever. This should make us all uncomfortable because this is not the way humans are designed to interact, and not good things are going to come from it.
And if you've been doing any tracking of the criticisms of social media nowadays, is that a lot of people are finding an escape to social interactions in the privacy of their phone and in their apps on their computer and so forth, that they try to avoid the messiness of life. And so they start working with AI. Now, next month, I've already plugged in a story for next month's consideration, is that we're going to be talking about how AI is becoming so refined and so good that the relational part, the conversational part, is beginning to seem so real that people are beginning to start commenting on social media about how I can actually create the perfect spouse. This is Star Trek. This is Harry Mudd. Those of you who watched the original series, where you
Harcourt Fenton Mudd.
Yes, that's it. Yeah,
I
the
feel
idea.
so alone.
Yeah. Oh, but a great chapter you've missed in your life, Krista. But that's the way people are. And again, I go back to something we mentioned earlier, and that is what seems crazy today. Just watch. Why would this even land in a story? It's because the movers and shakers think there's something here, that something's going to come of it.
Well, and then the second thing that we wanted to touch on from AI is something that we encountered. So, Bob, do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about what happened on our end with AI?
Okay. Those of you who are Luddites out there who don't want to mess with AI,
who probably aren't listening
Yeah, if you're a Luddite, you probably wouldn't be listening to us. But the point is it's hard to avoid AI. AI is, your life is full of it. Even the Luddites are experiencing AI. They just don't know it. It's become so refined that it's all around. Okay, we use it here at CLR. And we use it not always by choice and not always in the way that you would expect it happens. When we record a podcast, AI actually takes this and records a transcript. So if you go on to the platform, you can download the transcript. And it doesn't say Krista, Jeff, Bob. It'll say speaker 1, speaker 2, speaker 3 for talking and so forth. But it's pretty accurate. The transcript's pretty good. So we received an email from somebody who is critical. This came from the episode Outlawed or Unrestricted, What Really Changes, one we recorded not too long ago, where we kind of went, Krista introduced it as a thought experiment. So what if we got our way and abortion was completely outlawed? And then what happens if it was completely legal and we had no voice? We wanted to just play around with both sides of it. So what happened was that we got this email, and it said, it's not true that illegality, quote, only pushes it underground and often makes it more dangerous, end quote. If that were true, then laws wouldn't matter and laws couldn't teach. And so when we got the email, I immediately opened up the transcript and I did a search, and no place in the transcript did we say that. Now, we played around with the topic, but this is identified as an actual quote. And I'm thinking, well, which of the three of us said that? So we actually showed up in preparation for this recording, and I was mentioning it to the team here, and Jeff said, well, it actually isn't in the transcript. It's in the summary. The summary is actually created for us by AI. And we're all short-staffed here at CLR, in case you haven't figured that out.
Most of us on the podcast aren't even.
Right. I'm the only one. I'm the only one who gets paid. And so anytime we could find a way to shortcut the work. Well, it was a good experience for us because it gave us a chance to talk about, first of all, we think those little summaries are way too long. So I'm going to work with staff, and we're going to try to do something to modify that. But it was good criticism. Okay. Then I want to use this as a learning opportunity. I want to read on to what the person wrote. The person went on to say, I wish that CLR would stop adopting these talking points from people who advocate for the slaughter of the unborn. Now, I take exception to that. I'm the primary writer for what we do at CLR. I challenge this person to point out to me where I am taking the talking points and actually doing what the other side does and leading to the slaughter of the unborn. I think the learning point here is we deserve the hand slap, and I take that. But don't grind the axe so sharp because it hurts your credibility. Don't overstate your case. And I think there's a valuable lesson in all of us. We sometimes get frustrated. There are little things that trigger all of us. I am no different than anybody else. There are little phrases that set me off. Yes, that happens. But don't overstate your case because it hurts your credibility. To be honest, when I first saw this and I saw that last line, I dismissed the criticism. And I'm glad that we talked about it prior to recording today because the criticism was valid that AI should never have put that in there because that is not what we were saying. But don't overstate your case because when you are trying to talk to people who don't agree with you, they don't hear you when you are saying the truth. So there's a good warning. We learned from the experience. Hopefully everybody else learned from the experience and help us. Please, I'm still not magically going to have more staff after this episode so that now we're going to check all the AIs and it's going to always be clean. But I am going to integrate something that we're going to shorten those up and there probably will be one more set of eyes on it. So we thank you for that learning experience.
All right. Well, yeah, thank you, Bob, for mentioning that too. And we do thank all of our listeners as well. We are so grateful to everyone and know that you help us to make this podcast possible. So thank you very much. And if you do have any feedback, please reach out to us. Can't promise that it'll all make the air here, but we would be happy to be in contact with anyone who provides feedback. So thank you.
Though I will say we get so little direct feedback that there's a pretty good chance that if you wrote in, we'd respond to it.
Yeah, we pretty much have tried to respond to everything. Sometimes, and this is probably curious for the listeners, and that is there are people who just absolutely do not like anything we say. And so oftentimes, if they write something, not even the language is presentable, so they're just people who are like that. But those of us who are friendly fire, who ideologically and spiritually are with us, we welcome constructive criticism and we welcome the opportunity to keep improving.
So please feel free to reach us at lifechallenges.us and we'll see you back next time. Bye.
Thank you for joining us for the Life Challenges podcast from Christian Life Resources. Please consider subscribing to this podcast, giving us a review wherever you access it, and sharing it with friends. We're here to help, so if you have questions on today's topic or other life issues, you can submit them, as well as comments or suggestions for future episodes at lifechallenges.us or email us at podcast@christianliferesources.com. You can find past episodes and other valuable information at lifechallenges.us, so please check it out. For more about our parent organization, please visit christianliferesources.com. May God give you wisdom, love, strength, and peace in Christ for every life challenge.